by the way, is, and maybe I'll share my screen as well. So I'm going to try, I don't know if people got a chance. I kind of came up with this afternoon, but we've mentioned this tshuva of the Rivash about the question about two Jews who get married essentially in a Catholic ceremony. And so I was like, well, I was looking at a bunch of tshuvot today. I thought maybe that'd be good since we spent so much time on Kavav. And I landed on this Rivash and I realized it's a decently lengthy tshuva. It's not like crazy lengthy. And after I decided I wasn't going to give us the tshuva about a person who dies and then comes back to life and whether or not they need to get, which we'll save that till later. There's a couple on that, believe it or not. Amazing topic.
I remember learning that before. I remember learning it a number of years ago. Very strange.
I'm hoping I can throw it in at some point. But let's look at the
say that again about a person who dies?
Yes, who dies and comes back to life. We're not doing that today, though, so don't worry.
Okay.
Not dies not like Messiah dies, but like sort of brain dead or technically dead for 2 minutes and then
exactly. Yeah. So like what happens, do they need to get? So, okay. With that though, I want to look at this Rivash because here, and I should share my screen. Okay, everybody. Oh, nope. It doesn't want me to. Oh, shoot. Maybe it won't let me do it. All right. You guys just have to go. Oh, no, it will.
I've got it open. I can share my screen if you want.
It's, all right, I'm not going to mess with it right now. I'm on a new computer.
Google Docs. I think it's okay.
Yeah, you guys are all get it. So we're good. So we'll look at this tshuva of the Rivash. We'll see how far we can get in the next 40 minutes. Maybe I'll kick us off, and it will bring up a lot of. I hope this is maybe a good way to review. It'll bring up a lot of the topics we've talked about, and maybe some new ideas as well. And I did at the very bottom of it. I stuck in I think 2 short pieces from the Gemara, one from the Tosefta that he references in here, just to help people out a little bit. So, okay. So I'm going to start with the Sheila. Okay. So Sheila, Isha chat ba'a Mallorca, however he pronounces it in his day. Me'otan hanusot lavodat kochavim. So there's a bunch of people who are like forced to convert, right? They convert to Catholicism in his time, right? He's in the 14th century. Uvana becheka. And so there's a woman, she's got her child with her, held at her chest. V'nomar la mativcha, right? So they say, well, what's going on with you? Umativo shel benzen, and this child. V'amrash anus echad me'eretz argon. All right. Tavalina selo kodem hagzera kedat Moshe Yehudit. So initially she was going to get married to this guy in the proper Jewish way, right? V'lo al tabiado, but they couldn't get it. They couldn't get married. So then there was a decree that Jews had to convert potentially. So there's All right, so generally the idea is like after they convert to Christianity, he convinces her to let's go get married in this Christian manner. And she's convinced. Right, that's what I got out of that. But there were no adim, there's no minyan for Sheva Brachot or for Chuppah. All right. So it's on their altar, their Kohen, right? Essentially their chok. All right. All right. And so she lived with him like a wife. And lots of these other Jews who were forced converts as well knew about this. All right. Right. So she was, 3 months with him, and then she gets pregnant. So we know it's not another person's child. And this is her offspring here that she's holding. This guy goes across the sea. Right? And he doesn't come back. He's gone. He says, so what's her rule? And the rule of the kid potentially. So where do we stand with this? So this is it's a great setup here, right? It's obviously Rivash is not living in a time when there's secular marriage, there's religious marriage though. And here is a case of Jews getting married in another religious ritual. There are other Jews who know that they're married. But as we'll see, is there's no edut, as I said, no edut. It's not there's nothing Jewish about the wedding though either that's going on. All right, so it's kind of like a both sides going on there. Okay, so
I just want to quickly inject. I was thinking about this a lot after class the other night as well. We tend to sort of interchange the terms wedding and marriage.
Good.
And this is a great case of where that's really, we got to be very careful, because obviously there wasn't a wedding, but for all intent and purposes, it seems like there was a marriage.
Yes. And that's there is a wedding. It's just not a Jewish wedding.
Well, I mean, by our definition of a wedding.
No, but I think that actually really matters, because there might be, you might actually think there are three things. There's kiddushi and there's wedding and there's marriage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right. And that this was a wedding. This was a ritual. This wasn't like Rambam before Matan Torah, like willy-nilly in the shuk. This was ritualized in the only way that was possible.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's great. And I think both Asher and Sarah, you're bringing up these really good points of they're really, number one, Asher, you're right. Like they're living as if they're married. They are married in their eyes, potentially, and Sarah, you're right. Like, yeah, even though Asher, as you put it, it's not a Jewish wedding, it is a ritualized wedding at the end of the day. And so maybe it has some meaning. And this is right.
So I won't say wedding, it's not in these Nisuim.
Yes. Well, good. So
okay, and that's there it is.
And one of the questions that the Rivash is going to bring up here it was really interesting, is that we have traditions that like Bnei Noach have marriages at the end of the day, and they have rules, right? That we have a rule that like, right, Habal Eshet Ish of Bnei Noach, like if one of them, that might be a problem, right? You can't, that might be a death penalty sentence. That's one of the pieces from Sanhedrin I brought below. And so wait a second, maybe you didn't get Jewishly married, but like the laws of Eshet Ish might still kick in, that kind of stuff. So, okay, so good. So that's the setup. And do you guys, people want to read, or do you want me to? Yeah, someone read. And I'll just stop you when I need to. Asher, was that an Asher? Yavni, I'm looking at you and I said Asher. I think Yavni may have said something, but I'm not sure. So.
I had a question, but I think I'll wait and see how it comes up in the answer in the Rivash's answer.
But since you blinked first, you get to start. So.
Oh, sure. Okay, I can do that. Tshuva, אין ספק כי אירוסין או נישואין תקרם, כמו שתרצה, שנעשו בנימוסי עובדי כוכבים ובכהני במותם, שאין בהם חשש קידושין, אף אם היו בהם עדים כשרים, שהרי לא נתקיים בהם נתן הוא ואמר הוא. Should I translate as I go, or just keep going?
Just a general idea, yeah. So
he says there's no doubt that whatever wedding ceremony was performed, even if there were edim ksherim, like among the anosim there, wasn't a halachic kiddushin, because there wasn't the giving and the giving in the statement.
Yeah, I want to also maybe just emphasize, because this already kind of came up, right? He says, or tikraem kamosha tirtzeh, whatever you want to call that thing. Like there's already kind of dismissive language, which I think Sarah gets to your point. It's like, well, yeah, it's a wedding, if that's what you want to call it. You can just imagine that phrasing going on there. So, okay, good. So even with Adim, it's not, and this is, by the way, anticipates in Kav Zayin, right? The idea of Amarhu v'Natanhu v'Amarhu, and that, like what you actually need for Kiddushin, says that wasn't there. Okay, why?
Although you could make a case for witnesses, though, based on part of the question, because there were a lot of other forced converts who knew that they were living together like this as a married couple. And then you get the whole thing of Beto and the
He's rejecting that by relying on the Amar Natan Hu Amarhu. Like he's choosing that dafka to exclude, like saying that that's where it hangs in order dafka to exclude the other issue. I think
exactly. He is going to get in though to the like
Yeah, he goes there, as I remember. I learned this years ago, but yeah.
So into the yichud question and the fact that they're having sex at the end of the day. So we'll see that. So keep going, Yavdi.
Right. There's a lot more paragraphs to read.
Yeah, we're not going to get through the whole thing. It's very.
ואף אם נאמר שאין אמירתו מעכבת, כיוון שנתקבצו יחד כדי להתארס או להינשא, והווה כמדבר עמה על עסקי קידושיה, נתן לה ולא פירש דקיימלן דיו כל שעוסקין באותו עניין. מכל מקום,
But just give us the summary
וכאן,
of what his
sorry.
suggestion that he's about to reject is. Like, even if you were to say this.
So the suggestion that he's about to reject is maybe it counts under the category of they were like it's very clear that they're all there for the purpose of marriage, and they were, so it might fall under the category of they were talking about the matters of marriage, and then he gave her something, and it should count.
Great. This is, by the way, in Kaf Zayin. Does anybody remember whose opinion this is? Who says Dio? That's sufficient in the Gemara.
Sorry, I lost you there. What was it?
Does anybody remember whose opinion in the Gemara that we follow? It is that that's sufficient, even if he doesn't say anything. But they're talking about Iskin Kiddushin. This is just a little trivia, but it's Rebbe Yosef. We follow Rebbe Yosef, halachic Rebbe Yosef, that's sufficient. So, but Yavni, you put it. I just want to emphasize, you put it really well. It's like, come on, these two people got under in a marriage ceremony. Hey, he didn't say anything, but everyone knew what was going on. They knew what was going on. They're talking about wedding. All the stuff is there. The banquet is getting ready. The band is playing. Okay, he didn't say anything, but he gave her a ring. Come on, that counts. And that's the Gemara there, I think. And this is also where he's says you might say that here. He's gonna reject it. Go for the Mikol Makom.
And it is like giving us information that in the Catholic ceremonies they also gave a ring or something.
Well, good. Well, he's gonna.
But they don't.
Yeah.
He goes.
Oh, so that's gonna come.
That's where he's gonna go. Yeah. So.
מכל מקום, בכאן, הרי לא נתן לה כלום, רק שהכומר מברך אותם בקול גדול ונותן טבעת לכל אחד. So here, in fact, he didn't give her something, and instead the priest blesses them out loud and gives each of them a ring.
Yeah.
So maybe she's married to the priest.
You just threw all of Catholicism under the bus there.
And he is too.
Three's a correct.
What?
You just threw the entire Catholic priesthood under the bus there. It's kind of like but good. Okay, that's all right. Yeah, keep going for the moment. So this is good. So.
אבל מה שיש לעיין הוא במה שנתייחד עמה בפרסום ועמדה תחתיו ונתעברה ממנו. But we still have to wonder about the issue of the fact that they like secluded themselves together publicly, and she even got pregnant from him.
Good. I'm going to just pause you for a second. I'm going to just pause you for 1 second, just like to be pedagogical if people don't mind here, right? Just to summarize, right? He said he's rejected the idea that the ceremony that they had any relevance to Kiddushin, essentially. He says, but now they're living together. So now we have to, right? This is right exactly what Asher, your initial point was, right? They had a wedding. Does the wedding count at all? Maybe it's not a wedding, but then there's the point that they're living together, that they are, acting as if they're married. And so he dealt with part A. Now he's got to deal with part B. So, okay, go ahead.
Do you want me to keep going, or someone else?
Maybe you set it up. Let's, Asher, you want to take over? We'll go up in you guys, just the order you guys are in my window. So I'm just going to do that.
ושנינו בגיטין, בפרק הזורק, המגרש את אשתו, ולנו היינו בפונדקי בית שמאי אומרים, אין צריכים, I remember this, אין צריכים ממנו גט שני, ואתנו אומרים צריכה ממנו גט שני. So we already learned from Gittin about the situation where a guy divorces his wife, and then they hook up together in a roadside inn. Mm-hmm. According to Beit Shammai, he's got to give her a second. He does not have to give her a second get. According to Beit Hillel, he does. Meaning Beit Shammai does not see them as being married, even though they've hooked up that second time. Beit Hillel does see them as married again. Eimatai, בזמן שנתגרשה מן הנישואים, מודים ונתגרשה מן האירוסין, שאין סליחה ממנו גט שני, מפני שאין ליבו גספה. Okay, let me find my place. Because in the time that because he's already divorced her once, and he's already acknowledged that he's divorced her and he's broken it off, he doesn't need a second get, because we know that he's not in love with her. Like whatever they did, I think what he's saying, what they did was a physical act. It's not like his libo is not, his liv is into it. It's not like a.
They were never married. They were just erusin. They never did nisuin, right?
Oh.
Then they don't need a second get, right? But if they did nisuin, right?
Okay. Yeah. Okay. I see what I was missing the punctuation. Matai bizman shenitgasha minisuin. Umodim benitgasha. Umodim benitgasha mirusim she'en slicha mimenu get sheni mipnei she'en libo gaspa. So if they were only engaged to be married, then obviously his heart was never into her.
Exactly.
Which is why they broke it off. Which is why they broke it off before they actually went through with the kiddushin.
Exactly.
I mean, it's a justification for thinking that they didn't actually sleep together, even though they stayed together, as opposed to if they were already married, which we assume that they slept together, right? That's
exactly. It's almost like they went if they just did kiddushin. This is one of the reasons I picked this tshuva, because it has a nice review of this, right? If they just did kiddushin, we assume that they probably never have slept together, or at best once. This isn't like a familiar territory of two people. It's like, not, you watch, it's like a familiar movie plot, right? The couple that broke up and they're like back together, like, they get stuck in a hotel room together. They're going to sleep together. And maybe it's even because they're like, oh, maybe we want to get back together. They missed the old days or whatever. But if they just did erusin, like they didn't know what it was like to be married to each other. They never lived in the same house. They never, so they may have even slept together, but but we'll get there. But, we can't assume anything about them. They had no real relationship in that sense. So.
It's also interesting that it's discussing that his heart was into her, like the measuring stick is how much he loved her.
Yeah, it could also be familiar. Gisa can also be familiarity. It's nice, but it could also be, like they know each other.
Also, also lev, like in rabbinic idiom, doesn't necessarily mean heart. It can easily mean mind. So it doesn't have to have that kind of like sentimentality to it.
I was really hoping you would say that, whether we could draw a distinction between just a physical act and an actual emotional connection. But I know I'm living in my world of rom-coms. So,
I still like it, but it's like. But anyway, keep going. So just so we can get a little progress.
Okay. והסיכם בגמרא דמתניתין לאו ברוע ונבלעה
בחי גבנה.
בחי גבנה. ליקה לפוליגי בן שנתקרשה מן הנישואים ונתקרשה מן האירוסין. What we learned from the Gemara is basically that we don't draw a distinction between am I reading this right, or am I missing something here?
We conclude in the Gemara that our Mishnah is not the case where people saw them having sex, right? Because then it doesn't matter if it was, Nisuin, Kiddush, Erusin, whatever they were divorced from. There, because we'll keep going to L'chole Alma.
L'chole Alma tzricha mimeno get sheni she'en adam oseh b'ilато b'ilad znut. Okay, and v'choshim delisham kiddushin ba'al. Okay, so, but everybody would agree that in this case he does need to give her a second get, because people don't just do this out of znut. There obviously is something there, and so they're worried that there could be kiddushin of him like owning her, ba'alut. They
had sex for the sake of kiddushin, essentially. Is
right
what here. Okay, so but rather, what's our Mishnah actually talking about?
Elamanitin, Dikaid, Diko Ede Yichud, Velika Ede Bia, the Beit Shammai, Savre, Lo Amrinan Hen, Hen Ede Yichud, Hen Ede Yichud, Hen Ede Bia. But the Mishnah is actually saying that when the witnesses of Yichud, remind me, Lika.
There were witnesses for Yichud. There were no witnesses of the sex.
Okay. There were witnesses of Yichud. There weren't witnesses of sex. So Beit Shammai was saying that, or Beit Shammai is not saying that there were witnesses for Yichud and witnesses for sex.
They're the same thing. If you're, in other words, like because you were witnesses for Yichud doesn't mean you were witnesses for sex. That's Beit Shammai's opinion, and Beit Hillel thinks.
That that they are different,
Great.
right? Okay.
Mhm.
I'm going to stop here because my head is
Oh,
hurting.
no problem. Yeah. So that was I give you. So Sarah, you want to take over?
We're at Vimodim.
Modim, yeah.
Okay. Vimodim benit garsha min ha'erusim she'ena tzricha imanu gat sheni dekevan she'en li bo gasba lo amrinan hen edei kiddush edei yichud hen edei bia. V'kaim alan kibeit hillel kemat mitin and gitten da afilu im ra'ua shenivla chosheshin l'kiddushin kol sheyesh le'edei yichud v'nit garsha min ha'nisuin sheli bo gasba aval nit garsha min ha'erusim she'en li bo gasba ein chosheshin l'kiddushin ela sheyesh edim shenivla. So if you if they divorced her from they had gotten divorced from Nisuin, then you sorry, I flipped it around. Okay. Basically this is the same thing we just said, right? That,
Exactly.
like,
Yeah.
there's a different kind of connection if you've had sex before. Okay.
Right.
Amnam sarich shayu shnei edim biyachad im bevia im biyuchud aval bezulat zeh ein chosheshin klal. So this means that we need two witnesses for both the yichud and the bia itself, and without that, then there's no concern.
Great.
כמו שמבואר בתוספתא אחד בשחרית ואחד בין הערביים, זה היה מעשה, ואמרו החכמים אין צריכה ממנו גט שני.
Yeah. There's a case.
I don't totally understand what is that case.
Yeah, so the case in Tosefta where you have a couple who have sex, one person or yichud potentially.
Oh, one says in the morning, one says in the afternoon. Like, are they mitzarfiyin?
Oh, well, yeah, it is. Yeah, one saw them in yichud, at 7 a.m. One saw them in yichud at 8 p.m. Does that count? Right. And the answer is essentially they send it. I can't remember who the Rav is. They send the case to the Rav. He says no, you don't need a second get.
Okay, fine.
A get. Sorry, not a second get. So yeah.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. גם הוסיף הרשב"א ז"ל דווקא כגון שראה הוא את העדים, אבל אם לא ראה הוא את העדים, אף על פי שהעדים רואים אותם, אינה צריכה ממנו גט שני. That's really interesting.
Yeah, this is big. Give this to us. This is like an important point here that he makes.
Right. So the Rashba says that this is only in a case where he saw the Adim there.
Mm-hmm.
But if he didn't see the Adim, even if the Adim themselves saw, then you don't need it again.
Yeah. So, if Asher and Yavni witness, a man and a woman go behind closed doors in a room, but they don't know that Yavni and Asher saw it, that doesn't count as Eidut, according to the Rashba. Yavni, sorry, I'm going to project you. You seem to have a confused look on your face or a curious look. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'm wondering why. It's interesting, surprising to me.
Good. I think he goes on. If you remember correctly, he explains it here. So he does. Yeah.
לפי שאדם יודע שבמקדש בינו לבין עצמו ולא עדים אינה מקודשת, אף על פי ששניהם מודים, והילקח כשבעל זה לא לשם קידושין בעל, אלא בזנות בעלמא. That's brilliant. I love that.
Yeah.
So smart.
Right. So like
so smart.
People know that if there are no Adim, it doesn't count. So he's like, they go behind his closed doors, like there are no Adim to the fact that we snuck into this building. So clearly,
right.
Yeah. So they clearly have in mind, unless they designated Adim or they knew there were Adim there, they clearly didn't have in mind Kiddushin. So it's like a really clever argument. It's
a brilliant svara. It also it's not so crazy, right? Like for Eidut for murder, they have to be both seeing at the same time and stuff like that. So
yeah, and from the same angle, from the same point of view.
From the same point of view. So there is it's not so bonkers.
If I can add to it too, if that's okay. I actually think there's something really powerful going on here, and that one of the things we've done to define what is marriage is that it's a public act, right? In Judaism of I want the public to know that I'm married to this person for many, and we could say many reasons of the responsibility of it, that they don't marry other people, all sorts of, she doesn't.
That's the whole Re'at Mikudeshet. That's exactly what that is. That's a public statement that this woman is set aside now for me.
Exactly. And if two people don't think anybody's watching them and they go off and have sex, clearly the fact that they did it without anybody watching, part of this is they had no intention of Kiddushin because they didn't bring anybody into it publicly. So even if people were publicly watching, that clearly was not their intent at the end of the day. And that's a good way to determine intention of people is that nobody was watching or they didn't think.
So the question then is this assuming that, let's say the guy saw the witnesses, he'd say, we better not do this now?
Yeah, well, you can imagine. I mean, I'm the scenario I imagine he's talking about here, right? Where he's not back into our Catholic church wedding yet. Is a situation where, again, we'll bring the movies in because the movies, tell all these situations, right? It's like two people sneak off in the hotel, they like check the room beforehand to make sure. This is like a story from my own life. There's nothing to do with marriage or sex. But when I was in I was an officer candidate school for the Navy, and we got like certain time off that we could go out into town. And one of the things that you were supposed to do was be in uniform, and I didn't want to be in uniform. Nobody did. And I had friends who would who like knew all the drill instructors. So they would we'd go into like a place, like a bar, and they would sweep the bar for me to make sure no drill instructors were in there. And I go into my civilian clothes, right? It's like you check the place first, you make sure no one's watching, no one recognizes you, no one knows what you're doing. I feel like it's the same thing here. It's like so story of my life. Sorry, I had to throw that in, but I very fond memories of that time. I never got caught, by the way. So it was all good. Okay. But
Okay.
Keep going for a little bit, and then I'll take
ומן הדין הנזכר במגרשת אשתו ולינה עמו בפונדקי, הורו קצת מן הגאונים ז"ל שכל אישה שנתבעל בפני עדים צריכה גט, וחזקה שאין אדם עושה בעילתו בעילת זנות. Okay, but there are some of the Geonim say that you do apply this principle. ולפי דבריהם וכיוצא בזה דגיסי ההדדי, וגם שליחה להיות לו לאישה, היה נראה לכאורה שצריכה ממנו גט. כל שיש עדים שנתייחד עמה, אף על פי שאין שם עדי ביה. Okay, but so then those people seem to say that, even if you have edim that they were secluded, then that's enough. You don't need edei bia.
Yeah, remember, and the important things are, right, because these Geonim were following the Gemara, they're gisei hadadeh, that they have familiarity or affection for each other, whatever that was. He already took her once to be a wife, right? Kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, keep going.
דבהי גבנה, אמרינן הן עדי ייחוד, הן עדי ביה, וכיוון שנבעלה, אמרינן לשם קידושין בעל, דאין אדם עושה בעילתו בעילת זנות. So we assume that in that case, the edim for the yichud edim for bia are the same, and he obviously did bia for the purposes of kiddushin. Therefore, we're good to go. ואמנם הרם במזל דחה הוראה זו בשתי ידיים, וכתב שאלו הדברים רחוקים מדרכי הוראה ואין ראוי לסמוך עליהם. Okay, and the Rambam says this is like too crazy. We don't do this. These are the wrong. This is the wrong application.
Yeah, and if you remember correctly, I just want to because as is a good review, the Rambam himself actually spells it out. There are Geonim.
He says those words. Yeah, like that's a direct quote.
Exactly. The Geonim say this, and then the Rambam, who the Rambam was as Rav Nachman reminded us, is not afraid to argue with the Geonim at all. He has no fear of that, and is a really loud voice, right? The Rambam literally pushes them away, and that's what the Rivash is saying here. So, okay.
Okay, great. Okay. Shelo amru chazal chazaka zo ela beishto shenitkarsha bilvad lefi shekarov hadavar shenityachen ima o ba'alei l'shem kedushim mipnei sheda'ato lahachzira. Okay, but and so we only, right, the Rambam's on the team of like the narrow application of the principle, only apply it for this case of when he's divorced, because there's like a different kind of connection.
Exactly. And I'm going to have you skip down a couple of lines. You guys see my cursor is on Aval Bishar Nashim.
Yeah. Okay. Aval Bishar Hanashim. Kol panui habal pnuya ein choshashin lomar l'shem kedushin ba'al. Kimosha katav za in this place. V'chein hiskim harashba. Maybe Raya mimasha katav yevamot. Nose adam anusot beno umufetet beno. V'lo shana mefuteh bifnei echad o bifnei shnayim. Ve'od shelo niskar din zeb gemara. Ela b'megareshet ishto bilvad. Okay, and like also there are these other sugyot where it seems like this should apply, but it doesn't, and so it must obviously.
Well, I think I think the Rashba is right. Just I want to spell. Sorry, Sarah. I just want to spell it out here.
No, please.
Is that right? Is that we have a sugya in the Yevamot that if a person has, let's say his son seduced a woman, and even if it was in front of two Eidim, the father can then marry this woman because she was never married to his son, even though there were two Eidim, right? And so,
right.
So clearly that doesn't, just because two people sleep together, that doesn't mean that they're married. That's his further proof. Okay, and then there's never in the Gemara do they talk about a panui and a panuya and that they're married. It's only the case of when they were previously married. Okay, keep going.
וכן כתב רבי מאיר הלוי ז"ל והרבה מן האחרונים ז"ל, and here are many citations about where it says that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe I'll take over from here for a little bit, if that's okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Uv tosefta. Okay. Tanya kol biyashi l'shem kiddushin harezim mekudeshet v'she'ena l'shem kiddushin ena mekudeshet. All right. Umi pashta mashma deba'inin shetehe befirush l'shem kiddushin. Right. The tosefta says and implies that it has to be explicitly. You have to say this is for kiddushin. Right. Okay. But v'chol she'ena befirush l'shem kiddushin ena mekudeshet. Right. But if you're not explicit that it's for kiddushin, it doesn't count. All right. Ulfi dadzo shenireh nachon v'shira'ui lismoch alav benidon zeh, and we should rely on this in our case. Right. This seems right. Shelo amar befirush le'edim keshenit yachedima shehu mityacherima al dat liv'ol l'shem kiddushin ein chosheshin la. Right. This couple who got married in this Catholic church, it's not like every time they sleep together they get edim and they're like, I'm doing this for kiddushin. Right. And unless they're doing that, it doesn't count. All right.
But it doesn't have to be every time. It would just have to be
once. It would just be once. You're right. So it's a good correction, but they're never doing it, right? It's like nobody, look, I mean, so
nobody, anytime. It's not every time, anytime.
Yeah, no single time. Thank you. Yeah. It's nobody is, this guy, this man and this woman, when they're sleeping together, it's not like they're calling up their friends or whatever the ancient equivalent is of that and saying, guess what? We're going off for the sake of kiddushin to the bedroom, and they're not doing that. So I mean, it's an assumption, but I don't think they're doing that. Okay. And Ulafi Dadz, I got that. Yomar HaOmer, Afilu Rambam Hilchot Girushin Perek Yod Halacha Yotet Zal Lo Amra Ele Bepanui Habala Pniya B'derech Mikre Dekivan Shelo Piresh Arminan Deloni Kaven L'Shem Girushin Ele Liznus Be'alma Aval Zeh Shenasa V'Na'im Aliot Ishto Havalei Kimedaber Im Aleske Girushin B'Sha'a Shenechenima Vein Tzarich Lefaresh. He says, well, wait a second. Maybe you can say that the Rambam's case, right, where he says when there's two single people, that doesn't count as kiddushin. That's only when the two people who plan to have, sex once. But if they're doing it for the sake of marriage, then maybe none of this that I just said applies. And maybe that does actually count as, as kiddushin, and maybe the edim count. Okay. All right. Because again, this is the first point that Asher and Sarah brought up, was the whole question of, well, yeah, but they're still getting married at the end of the day here. This is a different case. All right. This isn't two people sneaking off to a hotel room. Okay. So Yeshli Ashiv, he's got a response to them. Vilomar, the Adarabba, Ibcha Mistabri. The complete opposite is the logic here. He says, even the Gonim, who think that nobody has sex for the sake of znut, right? And even they would agree that in our case here, for this church marriage, that was not done for the sake of kiddushin. Why? The kevanshi nu benisuim bechukat ovdei kochavim ubevet bamotam mipnei komer harehu keilu persho she'ein datam l'shem kiddushin kedat Moshe Yudid. The fact that they got married in a church is proof that it's as if they explicitly said, we do not want a Jewish wedding, right? And so they're the one opposite. Even the Gonim would agree that doesn't count as a wedding. No, we want a non-Jewish wedding. She'einam b'torat kiddushin v'gitin, and that's it's not in the laws of kiddushin and gittin. It's a different world. So had these two people who were forced to convert just gone and lived together as husband and wife, then maybe the Gaonim would say, yeah, they're married. But the fact that they had this action where they got married in a church even pushes aside that idea and says that it's as if these people said explicitly, we do not have any interest in kiddushin. So the imkan.
This is so bonkers.
Yeah, say more.
Sorry.
No.
It just is it doesn't fit with the realities of persecution in Spain at all.
Good.
They're not doing this because they wanted to. They're doing it because they would be publicly flogged if they didn't.
Yeah. But he's using the fact.
It's not like they have some alternative.
No, but but I think what he's doing here, he's saying we're going to pretend it otherwise, because otherwise we have to count this as a kiddushin. Mm-hmm. And he's actually trying to. He's saying this, even though you're right. It's modern, but he's got to give them this out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I just think there might be a better out that like my problem with this out is not the outcome, right? Like I'm on board. It's like better to say that there was nothing to see here, folks, right? But on the other hand, I think like the problem with this logic is that it fails to recognize this like kind of tremendously disruptive thing that's happened to them.
Yeah. Well, so
and like if you're coming at this from a like pastoral perspective, right? Like, yeah, on the one hand, you've got to deal with her, like the aguna problem, which like I'm not minimizing, right? But like there's got to be a way to do it that's not like, oh well, you just you chose to abandon it. Like,
yeah,
I don't know that you have to. I see what you're saying.
It's worrying.
I think you can read it slightly differently. I think you can read it as like this was not like it's just like saying that there's Jewish marriage and there's other marriage, and those are two different things. And they weren't having a Jewish marriage; they were having a marriage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No,
and therefore, why is that relevant? Is because it's a question of Gittin, and so like they were having a regular marriage for whom like Kiddushin and Gittin don't apply. It's just not a thing.
Yeah. If I could
and Mom Zerut with the kids.
If I could say two things about that, if that's possible, like
wait, why would anyway? Mom Zerut. Anyway,
yeah. So one is yeah. I think. No, I'm gonna agree with everybody here to some extent. I'm gonna be a bad teacher like that. It's or maybe a good one. No, I think like Sarah, you're right. I think there is a huge gap between being pastoral and psak halacha, and there should be, right? It's like you write psak on one hand to like justify what you're doing, to tell. I don't want to say justify, to tell a halachic story about what you're doing. But like, of course, you don't present this to the couple, right, or to the woman in this case, right? I think not. That's like my, but the other thing is, this is I think why he presents.
But like anybody reading this at the time of the Rivash is also like deeply affected by this problem.
Good. I wonder.
That seems like the bigger issue to me. Like the problem is not them; they're not going to read this. The problem is that his entire audience has had their whole world uprooted by this.
But I wonder if his audience is really just the Rav here who he's writing to, and that's all he wants to see this, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And the Rav could go to
the Homer.
You think, okay, interesting.
Yeah.
So, but
no, because like, where is he? He said they say where he is.
He's this was in I don't remember where it was. Yeah.
He was in Spain, but the woman was from Mallorca,
which is in Spain.
Yeah. So
great.
Yeah. I think, look, the other thing is what Yavni's saying is also true. Is like, this is him very simply saying, like, when you're freaking out a little bit about the fact you got married in a church. What we're worried about is halacha, and halacha doesn't recognize that. And so you're okay. Like at the end of the day, Gittin applies to a certain type of marriage. This is the type of marriage this applies to. And so you're okay. And it could actually be very pastoral, and that depends on who it is, right? I think this is an important thing of like, I think you guys are all bringing up like a really important point of the gap between, and sometimes the union of, both the gap and the union of pastoral care and halacha and psak halacha, which can come together sometimes and sometimes need to be separated in terms of, it's a side note, a great piece in B'midbar Rabbah where Rabbi Yochanan gives like one explanation for Tuma and Tahara to the non-Jews and another to his students, and I have to dig up that source, but like it's like you gotta tell it what fits where the person's head is at the time, and but yeah,
I'll tell you what it reminds me of. It's actually interesting. I have good friends of mine. She grew up very not religious and, let's say, having a wild young adulthood. Mm-hmm. And she was Chazarah b'tshuva. She fell in love with a guy who was a Kohen. And technically, she was considered a Zona because of her past.
Yeah. And
they were trying for about 2.5 years to get some kind of a heter where they could get married. And just as they were about to give up, I think they got from Rav Teitelbaum. He's from Boston, isn't he? Teitelbaum? He was? We're talking already 25 years ago.
Like Yolt, the Teitelbaums were the Satmar, right?
Okay. So, but anyway, what the answer they got was the only witness to her znut was her. And her testimony isn't accepted. And based on what the principle is, and that's also what I'm hearing here, if there were no witnesses, it didn't happen.
Yeah, which is
and with that they got a heter. They've been married now for 25 years. But it was a very interesting approach to say no witnesses didn't happen. So even if it did.
Yeah, no, you're right. And listen, I'm looking at the time right now because it's 2:44 and I have to go in a minute. Right. But if people don't mind, I think since we have a pretty regular crowd who comes to this, maybe we'll continue this next week as our Chazarah, because I think we'll have some time on Kaf Zayin, and this covers some of those issues too. So we'll hold it in our back pocket for the moment. But yeah, no, I think also like it's an important thing to like halachic language and reality don't always, they're not always, unified here, which is, I think, is legally interesting. Actually, it's not just like, it's not just a trick or anything like that. I think there's a lot more going on there about what the halachic story is, but maybe that gets too much into my own kind of view of psak halacha and how it works. But all right, good. Sorry, I know this. I knew we were not going to get that far, but we did pretty well. And
No, we got about halfway through this.
yeah, you're right. We did. But I do want to see next week the rest of this Rivash, because it's actually like he gets even more amazing, I think.
Excellent.
Anyways, so
Okay,
all
thanks
right.
very much.
And the Rav Moshe that quotes this is also bonkers.
Yeah, it is. So that's why I wanted to, All right. Good Shabbos, everybody. Kol tuv.
Shabbat shalom, shkoch to everybody.
Bye.
Bye.